The crystal wine glasses on our Thanksgiving table shimmered under the chandelier, casting fractured rainbows across plates of royal Doulton china that cost more than most people's cars. It was supposed to be a warm family dinner, a time for gratitude. But in the Sterling household, gratitude was always secondary to performance. 25 relatives were squeezed into my parents' formal dining room, a suffocating gallery of judgment where the air conditioner hummed a low, expensive purr. The roast turkey sat like a golden idol in the center of the mahogany table, surrounded by artisanal sides that looked too perfect to eat. But the real centerpiece was my sister, Clarissa. She stood at the head of the table, tapping a silver spoon against her glass, commanding attention like a general addressing her troops. She was wearing a structured blazer that screamed power lunch, her hair pulled back in a severe, flawless bun. "I have some news," she announced, her voice projecting with the courtroom resonance she'd practiced since law school. "As of this morning, the board has voted. I am officially the youngest junior partner in the history of Bradford and Yates." The room exploded. My mother, a retired federal judge, actually clasped her hands together as if in prayer. My father, a neurosurgeon with a god complex to match, raised his glass of vintage Cabernet. "That's my girl," Dad boomed, his voice thick with the kind of pride he rationed like water in a desert. Partner at 35. A legacy in the making. Clarissa basked in the applause, her eyes scanning the room, drinking in the validation. Then, her gaze landed on me. It wasn't a look of sisterly affection. It was the look a hawk gives a field mouse before descending. It was the moment I had been dreading, the inevitable insult wrapped in a smile. "Of course," she continued, gesturing toward me with her wine glass, the liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "Not everyone can follow the traditional path of success. Elena here is still exploring. 33 years old and still tinkering with her little computer projects while I secure a corner office." The table went quiet. A few cousins looked down at their plates. Clarissa laughed, a brittle sound. "Oh, don't look so grim. Every dynasty needs a cautionary tale, right? Elena is just a waste of space, honestly. But we love her anyway. She keeps us humble." My father chuckled. My mother patted my hand with a pitying look that hurt worse than the words. "Don't worry, darling. Maybe next year you'll find a real job." I smiled. It was a practiced expression, a mask of porcelain calm that I had perfected over 3 decades of being the disappointment. I nodded at my arrogant sister, raising my water glass in a silent toast to her hubris. Little did she know about the secret resting in my pocket, a nuclear launch code disguised as a smartphone. While the family erupted into another round of toasts to Clarissa's brilliance, I slipped my phone onto my lap under the tablecloth. The screen glowed softly in the shadow of the table. I opened my secure email client and composed a new message to Marcus Thorne, my lead attorney. Asterisk, subject, immediate liquidation, Bradford and Yates. Asterisk. Asterisk body. Execute full withdrawal of capital investment per Section 7.3 of the Silent Partnership Agreement. Dissolve the Obsidian Ventures holding immediately. Asterisk. I hit send. The reply came in 90 seconds. Asterisk confirmed, Miss Sterling. Initiating withdrawal of $4.2 million capital contribution. Formal notice will be served to the senior partners at Bradford and Yates within the hour. This will likely trigger a liquidity crisis for them. Are you sure? Asterisk. I looked up. Clarissa was beaming, accepting a hug from Aunt Martha, completely unaware that the ground beneath her high heels was about to liquefy. I typed back. Asterisk. Never been more certain. Asterisk. Mom was slicing the pumpkin pie, the silver knife sliding through the custard with a wet, heavy sound, when Clarissa's phone started vibrating against the mahogany table. At first, she ignored it, still basking in the afterglow of her announcement and the adoration of our cousins. But the buzzing persisted, an angry, mechanical insect demanding attention. She glanced at the screen, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows knitting together in a frown. "It's Arthur Bradford," she murmured, the name dropping into the conversation like a heavy stone. The senior partner, probably calling to congratulate me personally. She stood up, smoothing her silk skirt with a sharp, dismissive motion, and walked toward the hallway. "I need to take this." Through the open archway, I watched her silhouette against the foyer light. I watched her confident posture collapse as if her spine had suddenly turned to water. I watched her hand fly to her mouth, stifling a gasp, as Arthur Bradford delivered the news that would reshape everything she thought she knew about her precious firm. I helped myself to a generous slice of pie. It was delicious, spiced with cinnamon, nutmeg, and the distinct, sharp flavor of retribution. In the Sterling household, you were defined by your title or you were invisible. That was the unwritten rule we lived by. My father wasn't just a father. He was a neurosurgeon whose hands were insured for millions, a man who treated dinner conversation like a medical grand rounds. My mother wasn't just a mother. She was the Honorable Justice Sterling, a retired federal judge whose dissenting opinions were still studied in law schools across the state. They didn't just have children, they had a legacy to uphold, a dynasty of professional excellence that required constant maintenance and absolute obedience. Clarissa had been the golden child since she could speak in full sentences. She was arguing mock cases in her bedroom while other kids were playing with dolls. She had been groomed for the judiciary since she was 5. I, on the other hand, was the genetic anomaly. While Clarissa was interning at prestigious firms during her summers, wearing suits that cost more than my first car, I was in the garage, inhaling solder fumes and resurrecting dead motherboards from the recycling center. Elena is going through a phase, Mom would tell the relatives at every holiday gathering, her voice tight with embarrassment, trying to explain away my grease-stained fingers. She just needs to find her path toward success. But I never found the path they wanted. I forged my own. When I dropped out of pre-med after 1 semester, my father looked at me as if I had committed a violent felony. He left the dinner table in silence, a punishing silence that lasted 3 months. Clarissa sent me a text that night, a message I still have saved on my encrypted server. Asterisk, congratulations on throwing away your future. Asterisk, they saw a dropout. They saw a girl playing with toys. They didn't see that I was already coding algorithms that would outperform their retirement funds. They didn't see the empire I was building in the dark because they were too blinded by the glare of their own expectations. What my father didn't know, what I never told him, was that my playing with computers had already made me $500,000 before I could legally buy a drink. A security vulnerability I discovered in a major banking app and reported had earned me a bug bounty that would have taken him 6 months of grueling surgery schedules to earn. An app I built as a joke to track rare sneakers had been acquired by a tech conglomerate for 6 figures before my 21st birthday. I told no one. Why would I? Every time I tried to share a small victory, Clarissa found a way to minimize it, to reframe it as a fluke or a distraction from real work. Every family dinner became a competition I had never asked to enter. And in my parents' eyes, a competition I always lost, so I stopped competing. I let them believe I was the failure, the dropout, the waste of space who couldn't get her life together. It was easier than fighting for recognition from people who had already decided who I was. Meanwhile, in the background, I was quietly building an empire. By 25, my net worth had crossed $10 million. A cybersecurity startup I'd co-founded was acquired by a major defense contractor in a deal that valued my shares at $8.2 million. I used that money to start Obsidian Ventures, a private investment firm that focused on professional services companies, law firms, accounting practices, medical groups, the kinds of businesses my family worshipped but didn't understand from the capital side. I understood them intimately. I'd grown up watching how these businesses worked, listening to my parents discuss the politics and economics of their professions over Sunday roast. I knew that even the most prestigious law firms were often one bad year away from crisis, that their balance sheets were fragile, their cash flow dependent on a handful of major clients, their partnership structures designed to extract maximum profit while leaving minimal cushion for emergencies. Obsidian Ventures specialized in providing silent capital partnerships to these firms. We'd invest significant sums, typically $2 million to $5 million, in exchange for fixed returns and profit participation. No management involvement, no name on the door, just quiet money that let prestigious firms expand, hire talent, and weather difficult periods. My team handled everything. To the outside world, Obsidian Ventures was just another faceless investment fund. To me, it was proof that I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving in a world they couldn't even see. When Bradford and Yates approached Obsidian Ventures 4 years ago, I remember laughing so hard I spilled my coffee. The firm was in trouble. They'd lost 3 major clients in a corporate espionage scandal that wasn't their fault but had tainted them by association. Their senior partners were threatening to leave for competitors. They needed capital desperately, $4.2 million minimum, and the banks were nervous about lending to law firms in the current climate. My team brought me the deal without knowing my connection. Strong underlying practice, the analyst said, just need stabilization capital. The upside potential is significant if they can weather this storm. I looked at the partner roster and saw a familiar name. Clarissa Sterling, senior associate on track for partnership. My sister's firm, desperate for money, coming to me. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I invested $4.2 million through Obsidian Ventures, structured as a silent partnership with profit participation. The deal was handled by Marcus Thorne, with no mention of my name anywhere in the documentation. To Bradford and Yates, we were simply an investment fund making a strategic bet on their recovery, and recover they did. With our capital infusion, they stabilized operations, retained their key partners, and began rebuilding their client base. Within 2 years, they were profitable again. Within 3, they were thriving, expanding into new practice areas, hiring aggressively, climbing the rankings of top regional firms. The trade publications ran features about their remarkable turnaround, crediting the partners' strategic vision and unwavering commitment to excellence. No one mentioned the anonymous $4.2 million that had made the turnaround possible. No one knew to mention it. My investment had doubled in value. The $4.2 million was now worth over $8 million on paper, generating annual returns of nearly $600,000. Every quarter, I received detailed reports about the firm's performance, about cases won, clients acquired, associates promoted, about Clarissa's trajectory toward partnership. And through it all, Clarissa had no idea. She didn't know that her waste-of-space sister owned a significant stake in the firm she was so proud to join. She didn't know that her partnership, the crowning achievement she just announced at Thanksgiving, was only possible because I had quietly saved the firm from collapse. Every holiday she mocked me. Every family dinner, she reminded everyone of my failures. Every phone call with Mom somehow circled back to how successful Clarissa was and how concerning my life choices were. I absorbed it all, smiled through it, went home to my penthouse apartment in my investment portfolio, and reminded myself that revenge was a dish best served at Thanksgiving, right between the turkey and the pie, that someday the truth would come out. That patience was its own form of power. I just didn't know that someday would be this particular Thanksgiving when my sister finally pushed too far. Clarissa was in the hallway for 15 minutes. We could all hear fragments of the conversation through the wall. What do you mean withdrawing? And that's impossible. But the partnership vote was Monday. Her voice kept rising, cracking in ways I'd never heard from my always composed sister. The rest of the family tried to continue the meal, but the energy had shifted. Forks moved food around plates. Conversations started and stopped. Everyone kept glancing toward the hallway where Clarissa was now pacing, one hand pressed against her forehead. "What's going on?" Mom whispered to me as if I might know. I shrugged. "Work stuff, probably. You know how demanding law firms are." When Clarissa finally returned to the table, she looked like she'd aged 5 years. Her perfect makeup was smudged. Her hands were trembling. She sat down heavily, staring at her untouched pie like it might contain answers. "Honey," Dad reached for her arm. "What's wrong?" "Our silent investor," she said, her voice hollow. "The capital partner that saved the firm 4 years ago. They're withdrawing all of it. $4.2 million in capital plus their profit participation. They want it liquidated immediately." "Can they do that?" Uncle Robert asked. "Apparently, the partnership agreement has a withdrawal clause 90-day notice, and they've given it." Clarissa's voice cracked. Arthur said, "We'll have to postpone all new partnerships until the capital situation is resolved. That includes mine." The table went silent. The partnership that had been celebrated 10 minutes ago was suddenly in jeopardy. "But surely you can find other investors," Mom said, ever the problem solver, in 90 days with the holiday season starting. Clarissa laughed bitterly. "Law firm investments are specialized. The investors who do this don't just appear overnight." Arthur said, "We might have to." She stopped, composing herself. "We might have to let some associates go to cover the capital shortfall." I took another bite of pie and said nothing. The weeks after Thanksgiving were chaos for Bradford and Yates. Without the $4.2 million in capital from Obsidian Ventures, the firm's balance sheet looked suddenly precarious. The banks that had been happy to extend credit lines started asking uncomfortable questions. The expansion plans that had been approved were put on hold. The partnership track that Clarissa had worked toward for 8 years was frozen indefinitely. She called me 3 days after Thanksgiving, the first time she'd initiated a call to me in over a year. "Elena, I need your help." Her voice was strained, missing its usual condescension. "You work with computers, right? Maybe you know someone who knows someone in finance. The firm is trying to find replacement investors, and we're running out of options." "I thought I was a waste of space," I said mildly. "Why would I have useful connections? This isn't the time for—" She stopped, took a breath. "I'm sorry I said that. It was harsh, but this is serious. My career is on the line. Please, I'll think about it," I said, and hung up. Mom called next. Then Dad, both with the same message. "Help your sister. Put aside whatever petty resentments you have. Be the bigger person. We know you two have your differences," Mom said. "But family is family. Clarissa has worked so hard for this partnership. Can't you just try to help?" "I've been helping," I said quietly. "More than you know." "What does that mean?" "Nothing. Never mind. I'll see what I can do." I let 2 more weeks pass. Clarissa left increasingly desperate voicemails. The firm hired a financial advisor to find replacement investors. Arthur Bradford made calls to every investment fund in his network. None of them would commit. Law firm investments were risky, specialized, and most funds that did this kind of deal had already made their allocations for the year. Bradford and Yates was running out of time and options. Clarissa's partnership, the thing she'd worked toward for 8 years, the achievement she'd announced so triumphantly at Thanksgiving, was slipping away. I could have let her suffer longer. Part of me wanted to. The part that remembered every cruel comment, every dismissive laugh, every time she called me a waste of space in front of people who should have defended me. But I'm not cruel. I never was. That was always the difference between us. On December 20th, I texted Clarissa. *, "Come to my apartment tomorrow at 2 p.m. I think I can help, but we need to talk in person. *. Her response was immediate. *, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll be there. *. Clarissa arrived at my building at exactly 2 p.m. She'd clearly agonized over what to wear, professional enough to show respect, casual enough to suggest this was a sisterly visit rather than a desperate plea. She'd landed on a cashmere sweater and designer jeans, the uniform of wealthy women trying to appear relatable. She froze in the lobby when the doorman greeted me by name. "Good afternoon, Miss Sterling. Your guest, my sister. She's expected." Clarissa said nothing as we rode the elevator to the penthouse level. Said nothing as I unlocked the door to my apartment, 2,400 square feet overlooking the river, with floor-to-ceiling windows and art on the walls that would have made her jaw drop if she knew what it was worth. "This is—" She looked around, unable to complete the sentence. "You live here?" "For 3 years now. But how?" "You don't have a job. You don't." She stopped, recalibrating. "I mean, I didn't know you were doing this well." "No," I agreed. "You didn't know. You never asked." I gestured toward the living room. "Sit down, Clarissa. We have a lot to discuss." She sat on my leather sofa, looking as uncomfortable as I'd ever seen her. The confident lawyer who commanded courtrooms was gone. In her place was a woman whose world was crumbling and who had come to her waste of space sister for help. I sat across from her and placed a folder on the coffee table between us. "Do you know who Obsidian Ventures is?" I asked. "That's the investor who's withdrawing," she said. "Arthur's been trying to reach someone there for weeks, but they only communicate through attorneys." "Open the folder." She did. Inside, the operating agreement for Obsidian Ventures showing me as founder and managing partner. Bank statements documenting the $4.2 million investment in Bradford and Yates. 4 years of profit distributions flowing from her law firm to my accounts. The partnership agreement that Arthur Bradford himself had signed, never knowing that the silent investor saving his firm was his newest partner's little sister. Clarissa's face went white, then red, then a shade of gray I'd never seen before. "This is—" She looked up at me, then back at the documents. "You're Obsidian Ventures. I'm the majority owner and founder." "Yes, but that means—" Her voice caught. 4 years ago, when the firm was in crisis, when we almost went under, that was me. I invested $4.2 million to save Bradford and Yates from collapse, to save your career, Clarissa, before you even knew it needed saving. I kept my voice calm, controlled, the same way I'd learned to manage my emotions at family dinners for years. Your partnership track, your trajectory, your entire future at that firm. It exists because your waste of space sister wrote a check when no one else would. She was crying now, silent tears rolling down her face, smearing the makeup she'd so carefully applied. The composed lawyer who never showed emotion in court was falling apart on my leather sofa. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "All these years, all the things I said, and you never. Would it have made a difference?" I leaned forward. "Would you have treated me differently if you'd known? Or would you have found some way to minimize it, to take credit, to make it about you? Would you have said, 'Well, Elena's little investment helped, but really it was our hard work that saved the firm'?" She didn't answer. We both knew what the answer was. "I spent my entire life being compared to you," I continued. "Being told I was the failure, the disappointment, the waste of space who couldn't get her life together. And the whole time I was building something that dwarfs your law firm salary." Obsidian Ventures manages over $85 million in investments across 6 law firms and 3 accounting practices. My personal net worth is just under $15 million. I've built a company that employs 11 people and generates returns that most hedge funds would envy. I let those numbers hang in the air, let her do the math, compare her partner track salary to my portfolio, measure her success against mine using the only metric our family had ever cared about. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the river below. "But you never asked. You never wondered. You were so busy being the successful one that you never noticed I was building something real. You just needed me to be a failure so you could feel like a success." "What do I have to do?" Clarissa asked, her voice broken. "To save the firm, to fix this. Please, Elena, tell me what you want." I turned from the window. "I'm going to give you a choice, Clarissa. 2 options, anything. Option 1, I complete the withdrawal. Bradford and Yates scrambles to find replacement capital. Maybe they succeed, maybe they don't. Your partnership gets delayed by a year, maybe 2, maybe forever. You deal with the consequences of a firm in crisis." She closed her eyes. "And option 2, I reinstate the investment with modifications, a renegotiated partnership agreement that gives Obsidian Ventures a larger profit participation. A formal acknowledgement of my role as capital partner no longer silent, and—" I paused, making sure she was listening. "At the firm's holiday party next week, where they were planning to announce your partnership, you introduced me to Arthur Bradford as your sister, as the founder of Obsidian Ventures, as the person who saved his firm. You want me to publicly acknowledge that your waste of space sister has been bankrolling your career for 4 years?" "Yes, that's exactly what I want." I sat back down across from her. "I'm not asking you to humiliate yourself, Clarissa. I'm asking you to tell the truth. There's a difference. And honestly, the truth is far more interesting than the fiction we've both been living." She was quiet for a long moment. I could see her wrestling with it. Her pride, her image, the narrative she'd constructed about who was successful and who was not. The story she told herself for 30 years about being the accomplished sister while I was the failure. "There's one more thing," I said. "No more waste of space comments, no more comparisons at family dinners, no more treating me like an embarrassment you have to explain to relatives. From now on, you treat me as an equal, because that's what I am. That's what I've always been. You were just too blind to see it." She looked at me for a long time. Really looked, maybe for the first time in years, seeing not the failure sister she'd constructed in her mind, but the person who was actually sitting across from her. "I've been horrible to you," she said quietly. "I don't know how to fix that. You can start by accepting option 2. The rest will take time." She nodded slowly. "Option 2, I accept." The holiday party was exactly as awkward as I'd anticipated, and exactly as satisfying. Clarissa introduced me to Arthur Bradford with visible discomfort but genuine words, her hand resting tentatively on my shoulder. "Arthur, I'd like you to meet my sister, Elena Sterling. She's the founder and managing partner of Obsidian Ventures." Arthur's face went through several phases. Confusion, recognition, and then a kind of stunned respect. "You're Obsidian? But we've been trying to reach you for weeks. We feared a hostile takeover was imminent. No hostile takeover, I said, shaking his hand firmly. Just a strategic realignment. I understand there's been some concern about liquidation, but I'd be happy to discuss the path forward. We spent an hour in his office that evening renegotiating terms. The new agreement gave me a seat on the board of directors and a significantly higher profit participation. In exchange, the firm got stability, and Clarissa got her partnership. She was officially made partner on January 15th. At the celebration dinner, she gave a toast that made my mother cry. "I want to thank my family for supporting me," she said, raising her glass, her voice trembling slightly. "And I especially want to thank my sister, Elena. I spent years being an arrogant sister, throwing every insult I could think of at her. I treated her like she was invisible while she was quietly building something extraordinary. I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I'm grateful that she's generous enough to offer me redemption." The room applauded. My parents looked shell-shocked. Dad kept glancing between me and Clarissa like he couldn't quite reconcile the new information with his old assumptions. The successful daughter he'd celebrated was publicly thanking the failure daughter he'd dismissed. After the dinner, he pulled me aside, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "Elena, I owe you an apology. A real one. I thought you were drifting. I thought you'd eventually need a trust fund or a handout to survive. I was so worried about the sterling legacy that I didn't realize you were building your own." "You never asked," I said. "You were so busy defining success by your standards that you never wondered what I was doing." He nodded slowly. "I'd like to change that, if you'll let me. It's been 6 months now. Clarissa and I aren't best friends, we may never be, but the dynamic of the arrogant sister and the victim is gone. We are honest with each other. She calls to ask my advice on firm finances. I call to ask her opinion on legal structures for a new acquisition. At Easter dinner last month, Mom asked about my work for the first time in years. She asked about my seat on the board of directors, actually listened, and seemed interested in understanding my world. It wasn't enough to erase decades of humiliation, but it was a start. Obsidian Ventures continues to grow. We've expanded into 3 new markets. Last month, Forbes Times reached out about including me in a feature on women in private capital. They want to photograph me in my penthouse with the river view behind me. The headline they're proposing is, "The Quiet Force, How Elena Sterling Built an Empire in the Shadows." It's a little dramatic, but I like it. After 33 years of keeping my life a secret, a little drama feels earned. Because here's what I've learned. Being invisible is a form of power, but it's also a form of prison. You can build empires in silence, but eventually, you have to step into the light. Eventually, you have to let people see what you've created, not because you need their validation, but because hiding is its own form of shame, and I have done nothing to be ashamed of. I was the waste of space for 33 years. But space, it turns out, is exactly where you build things when no one is watching, and I built an empire.